I'm just going to introduce the event and then facilitate the questions. Construction is a critical industry for the UK economy. It's worth 6.7% of gross value add. But we're in recession. The construction sector was quite a bit bigger back in 2007, worth more like 8.9% of the UK economy. So the question we are wondering here is it returning to growth? Well, the good news is there are definitely green shoots. The Glenigan Index, which measures the value of new project starts, is 15% up on a year ago. And some research done recently for New London Architecture has identified 236 new towers being planned for London. The challenge, however, is complexity. EC Harris wrote a report for the UK government last year which identified that in a typical large building project, the main contractor could be managing up to around 70 subcontracts. And that study identified a number of crucial factors for successful delivery. Things like involvement of the supply chain in design, strong collaboration with suppliers, effective site management, and ability to respond to change flexibly. Well, today we're going to address those factors. We've got a number of expert speakers for you. First of all, we have Andre Gibbs, who's a partner at the property developer Argent, and he's been working since 2001 primarily on the King's Cross redevelopment, in particular on land assembly, business planning, finance, infrastructure and sustainability. Second, we have Stephen Eglinton, who's spent the last 15 years helping organisations make better use of location information. DEFRA, Tube Lines, and other companies he's worked with. He's also a director of the AGI, the Association for Geographic Information. And finally, we'll have Caroline Steer, who is an expert in GIS, a GIS consultant at Esri UK, and will be talking about creating 3D visualizations, geospatial analysis, and web mapping. You'll be familiar, I know, with this picture, the construction life cycle, from planning through to design, build, operate, maintain, upgrade, and finally decommission. Well, today we're going to be covering all those areas and touching on each of them and how location information plays a role in the effective delivery of those parts of the life cycle. So I'm going to now hand over to Andre Gibbs, who will be talking about managing the King's Cross redevelopment.
Hello. Hi. Yes, I'm Andre Gibbs, and I'm a partner at Argent. And I need to bring up, and have been at Argent since '98, but have been involved with King's Cross development since about 2001. And most of our use of GIS to date has been evolved on that development. Just to give you a brief overview of what that development is. King's Cross is in central London. It's between King's Cross and St Pancras stations, and it is a scheme which has come out of the large investment in infrastructure that's happened in that area, over £2.5 billion on transport infrastructure, and it's about 67 acres of land which was surplus following that. It has international rail connections as well as national connections, and it is the best connected London Underground station in London. So overall, it's actually the best connected transport interchange in the Western Hemisphere. The master plan is 67 acres, and it includes about 8 million square feet overall. More than half of it is office or commercial use, but it also has a very large residential component and significant retail and cultural elements, including University of Arts London, who have their campus on the site. So it's quite large, it's significant, and it's quite complex. And we're about 85% through the infrastructure, and probably about 30 or 40% through the buildings on site. But already it's become a new place in London, and it's now on the map. It's got significant occupiers, and is a part of the London scene. So, what were some of the challenges that we had? Trying to get consistent information for development this complicated was obviously a challenge, and more importantly, how do you communicate quite large and complex things simply to people who whose day job is not to absorb it. Later on, having a single source of truth, so we had always knew when we were talking about something, we were talking about the same thing. We have a vast number of stakeholders, and we have a large supply chain. We have and a large audience, being the community, the planning authorities, our customers, and London and national government in general. And you know, one of our big issues around information is making sure everybody really understood, had a common understanding about what we were doing. Near the beginning of the development, before we even really knew what we were going to build at all, we set the agenda for consultation by doing a document called Parameters for Regeneration, and it appears on various different websites that I've seen. It's not all authorized, but what it set out to do was to set out to the stakeholders, or the various people we'd be engaging with in coming up with our scheme, what we were dealing with, so that people at least had a common understanding, and we were not debating in an environment of misinformation. The first time we used GIS was in mapping up a lot of the information about the area on a set of plans which formed part of this document. It was about a 100-page document, which was typically a plan on one page and some text on the facing page. So it included things like mapping where all the listed buildings were, the heritage constraints, but also where the ground had contamination. It had details about what the various uses were in the surrounding area, and many other sets of mapped information. But we didn't really use it as proper GIS. We kind of used it as a way of quickly and effectively getting some useful information out. But we didn't. It was done principally by one of our consultants, and we didn't actually embed it at that stage in the process. And the main barrier at that stage was to have GIS as a working platform was extraordinarily expensive, and we didn't have the skills or the desire or the infrastructure to use it, to embed it within our overall processes, bearing in mind that only one of our consultants was even using the platform at that time. This is back in 2001, 2002. As we moved on, we found some uses for where we thought, you know what, it would be good to have some GIS, and we got a UCL master's student to do some part-time work for us, and we started mapping up some things like using it properly, so mapping up data of what our different titles were for who owned different pieces of land and what encumbrances they had on them. One of our consultants was already using tabular information to map geotechnical site investigations, boreholes, trial pits, and so we had some data sets which we started to put into at that time a manifold GIS system, and started to get some feel for it. We didn't. It was kind of a nice way. We weren't spending a huge amount on it, but we just thought it was something worth experimenting in, and we we used this, and we got familiarity as a company with the idea, and we did a bit of ad hoc analysis on different stuff. So, for example, when we were trying to decide how we were going to finance starting the development in the context of the world financial crisis, we were starting in at the end of 2008 with Lehman Brothers just having gone bankrupt, and we were saying, well, actually the best thing right now for us to do is to get on and develop, because while the world sorts itself out, what we want to do is have all the infrastructure in place. But we mapped the various bits of infrastructure and the various plots, and linked this to outputs from analysis to start to communicate to our to the financiers and to our boards and to our investors how tactically we were going to work our way from making it a site where you couldn't develop anything because the infrastructure overhead was enormous, to being something that by putting in place various pieces of infrastructure we could narrow the funding gap and move some plots into the green where we could actually get on with them. So it was and recycle receipts to get on with them. So it was a useful tool, and at that time we referred to it as CFD, which stands in this case for Colours for Directors. I do know what it actually means, but it was a very powerful way of displaying very complicated information and running various scenarios, but be able to communicate in a way that was easy for people to digest and understand. And then you drill down to the detail after that. And similarly, we're mapping up various bits of infrastructure related to that process. Moving forward now, we are in the middle of a very large program of delivery. We're spending about £1 million a day on construction, so it's pretty intense and a lot of moving parts. And at any given time, we probably have about 5 or 6 or 7, sometimes more, construction projects going on, and also our appetite to the complexity has identified to us that we need to manage these things properly, and our earlier experience with the GIS meant that, well, actually we would go out and hire somebody proper with some real experience to have some in-house support, but also work with Steve Eglinton, who we'll hear from later, and others, to try and put in place some processes where we could, properly track what we were doing and have some proper auditable processes, so where we could rely on the mapping to understand and manage our development. And just some examples of things we do. We have developed plans which show all of our plots, and we show various business information associated with them. For example, what state, whether something is on site, completed, or is in pipeline, or is twinkling in somebody's eye. Being able to constantly have that up to date. It's actually our chairman's one of his favourite plans, which he accesses through his iPad and finds out what floor space are. So it's certainly not something he loves it, and it's good for at a glance senior stakeholders understanding where they are and communicating to their own their parent organisations, and then other things like mapping where the tunnels are, mapping where we have heritage assets, just putting on site and constraint type information. Another one where we've formalised process and used GIS as a platform is on plot setting out, and we've used it for briefing the architects, but also use it to facilitate a process where if someone wants to build outside of their plot, bearing in mind that we own the street and the plot, so nobody believes that the plot boundaries are actually fixed, we have got processes in there to make sure that if we do consider moving things around, we understand the impact on adjacent plots, and we can make decisions about whether or not we want to do that. And also we've been doing some work with the land registry to make sure that their mapping and now they're publishing information in GIS. Everybody believes that they know to within a few millimeters where everything is, when in the past the land registry plans came out of things written with a big fat pen drawn on a bit of vellum, and we've done work with them to make sure we've rationalized all of our boundaries and make sure that other people's understanding of the title is as we understand it, but also to make sure when we are leasing plots or financing them or carrying out our own work, we're operating within land that we own. Rule number 1 of property development, which is the most ignored rule, is do you own the land? It's the first question you should always ask, but so it's quite useful for understanding that. Something that we're kind of finding very useful now that we are moving into the later stages of design. So we've got planning permission for about 60% of the site, and we're now getting to the stage where decisions about how we phase things will impact on construction logistics in particular. When we were doing the first phase, you have 67 acres, the contractors do get a little bit lazy and use the entire site as lay down area. Now we actually have to operate an estate which is open for business for most of it, and also has construction activities going on many fronts. And we've tied our maps to an overall illustrative program so that we can monitor, so that we can make sure that what's being delivered actually works, and we can choreograph it properly and actually have an image that we keep up to date, that if there are any potential occupiers, we can give them with a reasonable amount of confidence one way in which we envisage the world might turn out. Property development is not a deterministic process. It's always market driven. It's the programs for it at this level, but always having an attitude and understanding about how you're actually going to, the end game is useful to make sure you don't paint yourself into corners. We have been using the online maps facility, and actually it was the new technology of the online maps which has encouraged us to invest more, because there was no way we were ever going to invest in single license seats for everybody within the company and make them into GIS experts. Desktop GIS really didn't work for us, but being able to, because all you're doing is just having a poor GIS department just producing maps constantly. But the idea of being able to have some self-service information, which is at the right level for the various stakeholders, means that this is now something which a lot of our project delivery team, our asset management team, and I mentioned the chairman, but other senior executives are using the online platform so that they can actually understand and know where we are at any given point in time. And that's really allowed us to, that's really created a virtuous circle of people having easy accessibility to information, of wanting to invest the time and effort into making that information good, and we're prepared to make it, put the investment in. I think the most detailed and sophisticated example of how we've been using the GIS, and particularly the time enabled, is mapping out our construction logistics. And this is really very much about knowing what we've got at any given point in time, where our construction compounds are, where the craneage is going to be, so that we can ensure that different contractors are not falling over each other. There's a big health and safety benefit to this, being able to plan things out, so we're reducing health and safety risks, but also so that people who are responsible for managing the estate and occupiers can have good visibility of what is happening on the other side of the hoarding, so they know, so that they can communicate properly to our occupiers what's actually going on. And this has been very useful and very powerful tool for us. So moving on from King's Cross, we are also involved at the beginning of large projects elsewhere in the UK, and including Airport City in Manchester. And I think what we've learned a lot from our journey with GIS in King's Cross. It had some fault storms. We've learned about data management. We've learned what works and what we will use and what they won't, and how we need to organise our information to ensure that this is not additional effort but just complementary effort. And we at the ground level now, we are structuring our cost planning, our plot taxonomy, all around making sure that people are doing things in a way, not doing any more work, but just doing things in a way that is compatible with us using that information geographically. And so on this and future developments, we will, where it makes sense, we will certainly be investing in having a good GIS backbone to decision making, because it has, where we have used it, it has been very valuable, and in some cases not, but we've disposed of those, and we are able now to refine our use and help us to understand more complex things as we move on as a company. And that's about it.
Great, thank you, Andre. That was very very informative. Just finishing on the new project, and I guess that's where we can take lessons learned. So I'll just queue up my presentation. So my name's Stephen Eglinton. I work for a company called GeoEnable, and as Andre said, I've been working with Argent and particularly on the King's Cross project for 18 months now. So it's coming up to 2 years. And as we've heard, we've embedded so location information and different solutions across the organisation. So I'll just give a quick overview to how we set things up, basically, and the messaging, and how we've looked at information management and information governance, and then give you a quick demonstration of ArcGIS Online. So location intelligence is a term that's starting to be used, and that's something that I quite like. As Andre ended on there, we started to discuss that we have to think about the actual end users, and that's something that I'm absolutely focused on. It's why are we making these maps or these information products, and what do people want to do with them? And that's where we need to understand the requirements. So even things like using the correct language, so people understand what we're trying to do. Like, so there's business intelligence, perhaps some subset of that could be location intelligence, and that would be using maps in the same way you might use dashboards or key performance indicators. So this is particularly for senior managers. So this is a term that's starting to get used more across what would have been called, and perhaps is for some of the GIS industry. So this is a wider term that I'd like to use for the things that we've done at King's Cross. Just quickly, this slide, and this is my representation of how things are moving. So at the bottom we talked about geocentric, and again Andre touched on how we at King's Cross, and particularly at Argent, we had desktop GIS, and we've moved to a different deployment method, a different way of sharing the information products to a wider audience. So just on the diagram there, if we start on the bottom, perhaps that's the more traditional way of desktop GIS, and people with skills, highly skilled and quite complex technology. We're moving to an environment where we can give these solutions to a wider range, a wider audience, and particularly embed them in other products, existing products. So that's something we're seeing more of, and it's becoming a lot easier to do technically. So the technical challenge is not there anymore. It's working out what we need to do with them is the work. So just moving on, if someone asked me what do I do now, I'd probably describe myself as an information manager. So I have to try to get people to think about information. So we have information products. So they could be maps, they might be web apps, they might be potentially tables, tabulated information that has come out of using location information, but ultimately they have to inform people. So the technology is interesting and it's wonderful. It enables us to do what we need. But again, taking on the theme of we need to know what people are going to do with the products, I'm certainly keen that we get people to think that there is information behind there somewhere, and you can use that to obviously, if you've got a technical background, you'd know we can use it to style, but it's that persistent theme that that it's richer, that the web maps we have is rich with information, and that needs to be a persistent message, and the information is often from other information systems or other sources. So just as we've already heard, the requirements at King's Cross were defined, and we've GeoEnable have worked there for, like I say, for 18 months. But certainly when we went in, it was more a strategic role. So it was more setting the scene, working out the business requirements, what was needed, and ranking the business requirements, and making sure we were able to iterate, so to continually improve the products that we were making. So this list here is just an example of the requirements or the uses that certainly I proposed initially, and they've persisted. So I don't think I've changed them. These were assertions at a high level of how web mapping and information, location information products would help the organisation. So the top one and the persistent one has to be absolutely communication and collaboration. So everything else in some way hangs off that. So everything we've seen is all about communicating. So all the others are subsets in some way. It might be how you do it or what you're trying to communicate, but ultimately it's all about communicating information to people in a concise and clear way. So that's a persistent theme across it. Another one I just want to pick out there is the third one: time saving and reuse, particularly of survey and CAD, so computer-aided design and survey information. I'll touch on that again shortly, but certainly reuse of existing information, so it might be survey or CAD or even some GIS data that was already existing, has been a major thing that we've done. So we've actually structured CAD and survey in a way that we can use it easily and publish it easily. So that the actual structure of the data ultimately has to be looked at, but certainly the requirements need to come first. So we defined a vision. There was a strategy document, which I won't talk about for the purposes of today, but certainly it was at a high level. So, you know, where are we heading? What is the goal? And as I've already said, it was to inform people. So it's supporting informed, data-driven decision making. And again, that persists. That has to be the thread of what we want to do with the solutions. This diagram also I use to communicate how the system would set up. So I won't labour it today because we don't want to go into any technical depth, but certainly this is meaningful to multiple audiences, I'd say, as well as IT, as well as people that are not IT professionals. It's simply a way of representing that we have the information in the web map products is hosted off-site. So it's part of a product called ArcGIS Online, and that offers wide flexibility and agility for the hosting. So and it's the cost is quite reasonable with regard to it being cheaper than more traditional solutions. So and just to see at the top right there, you can also have the map products on mobile, and that's native. So whereas just perhaps a few years ago that would have been a particular project to publish maps on a mobile, this is just something you get anyway. This is something we have, and something no doubt in the near future we'll start to look at even potentially capturing data. So we're focused mainly on the web applications at the moment, but in the near future, no doubt we'll start to look at the map applications. In fact, I know Andre uses the maps on a tablet occasionally, so that is useful. Again, focus, another focus has been not only on the messaging and consistently being focused on the purpose of why we're doing things, and what products we're making, and who is going to use them, but actually the process. So again, this was mentioned about how do we get the data, how do we fulfill a business process, and what information do we need to do that. So this is just one example. This is obviously a high-level diagram with no great detail, but it just gives an indication of, on the left there, an external stakeholder. So it was a contractor who provided information, and then we joined it, so we added information to it, so it was a map product, and then we published it on the right there. We published it to ArcGIS Online. So basically, we're expanding the use of that information and the visibility across the whole organization. But what we needed to be clear about was, do we have governance? Do we have information management around that? Do we know the age of the data? When is it updated? All these issues. So things, someone with my background would call that all sort of metadata and information governance, but basically it's just knowing what data do you have and what can it be used for and what can't it be used for. So I'll just give you a quick demonstration of some of the background, and we have seen some examples that Andre has shown us, some screen grabs from the web application, some map products. So we still have PDF products using map books, and they still have their place. I'll just share my screen. So you should be able to see now the King's Cross GIS portal. So this is using ArcGIS Online product, and it's been configured. So it's not customized. It's relatively easy to configure. In fact, it's very easy to configure. Like I said already, the work comes in actually working out how are you going to configure it, what are the user groups you want on there, what are the permissions, what are the layers, the map products that you want. So that's the effort, not actually the configuration in itself. So you have a carousel, and you can group the map products and other content. You can upload other content as well, so Excels, for example, by themes. So there's been quite considerable research. So I had an input, but there was a full-time GIS manager at Argent called Lily Vidra, who is part of her full-time job is actually to make sure we are very aware of what the group should be. So without further ado, I'll just show one of the map products that Lily's developed. So it's quite nice here because you can group. There are templates. We can actually group the products. Just go back. I think I got off my screen. Okay, apologies about that. You can actually group things, like I say, based on who wants to use them, but you can then have these templates that actually can have subgroups, so it's quite a logical way to navigate. So in this particular example, if we look at logistics, so we've got a time-enabled one here. So again, the real power, particularly for senior managers, was being able to visualize things and over time. So as a construction project, it could be certainly in the future, we can also use it for asset management regimes or facilities management or for inspections. But the power to actually have to allow you to filter things by time is quite powerful. So every element, every feature, so in this case their buildings, knows when it should be there. And in this particular example, it shows you what status it would be in. So I'll just show you another logistics one, which is that one. So that was like a business plan. That's a very high level business plan. I just wanted to show you one with more detail. So this is fairly complex. It's one of the more complex ones that we've done with lots of different layers. So it looks complex, but you can filter it, and it is completely meaningful to the end users as they would have these maps anyway. And again, critically, you can filter it over time. So this is the site as it will be developing, and what will be on site and when it will be on site. So, for example, temporary roads, gates change. So on a construction site, we'll have where you can physically enter the site will change at different points in time. And again, you can use this for planning. We can share it to external stakeholders. So nearly all our products at the moment are internal, but you can add people to the account. So people with the right password and permissions, and if they're in the right group, can see these products. So that's something we can certainly do, is share it externally. You can see it's changing over time. If you want to interrogate any of the features there, for example, they have information behind them as well. That's another example. Just another quick example is utilities. So again, I mentioned CAD and reuse of existing information that we already had. So we didn't need to create the raw information. It did exist in CAD format, but we certainly did. It needed to be normalized. It needed to be put in a format that was easier for us to manage, basically. So again, that's to do with process and information management. It's not really to do with the technology. Technology is defining what we need. So in this case, it's very simple, and there are multiple layers for different utilities, but just the only thing I've got turned on at the moment here to keep it nice and simple is the water, for example. So these are physical assets, so pipes in this case, that are actually in the ground, and then we've got the information. So very, very simple. You could go out on site and use exactly the same map. You can use exactly the same map on a mobile device, on a tablet, for example. So again, that's a real simple way of reusing information that already existed. It was, I think, we actually only used it on a PDF previous to that. Another example, just very quickly, would be the land interest. So we mean, Andre mentioned land registry. So that's obviously the national land registry company, as you would imagine, in the United Kingdom. And again, we have information with regard to the freehold, the land ownership. And this is transparent across the whole organization. As things change, we can update it centrally. And again, this could be used in a mobile situation. The maps can also be used in other templates. So this screen here is a template, for example. So it's not the native map. It's a nice way of constructing a frame around a map to make it more user-friendly and more concise and more focused. But just as an example, if I click on here, I can open the native web browser, so the regular map that you get, which is fully functioning. And you could, if you had permission, you could annotate, you could measure, things like this. So you can have a workflow on top of it. So there's lots of different maps in there. Like I said, all focused. So it's perhaps a different way of working for some GIS professionals. So we don't have one map with 100 layers in it, and we don't have to train people necessarily to use it. So we do have awareness sessions, but certainly they don't need technical training. It's quite intuitive to use. So they're just some examples. I hope that gives you an idea. We've got quite a few maps, so I certainly won't go through them all, but I'll just put back my presentation. So as a quick demonstration, like I say, mobile is something we will be working on, and you get the same information. So in this particular example, we're clicking on a building, and then we're getting a representation of how it will look in the future. So again, this might be used for marketing. So there's all very many different threads to how these map products can be used. Marketing, external communications, stakeholder engagement, internal business workflows. It's like I say, the trick is to be focused and say, well, actually, what are we trying to achieve here? Something else we're currently working on is there is a plugin, so you can have these map products actually inside Microsoft PowerPoint and Excel, and also within SharePoint. So SharePoint is a content management system, and that's something that Argent have, and we're putting maps within it, so it becomes part of somebody's normal workflow. It's not something additional that we're doing. And again, this is the messaging. Andre mentioned single source of truth. So this is the concept of that might be called master data management. If you've got an IT background, it's actually being clear about not duplicating information that you have and make sure it's managed in an appropriate way, that it won't be duplicated, and that it is reused appropriately. So again, these are sort of the messages about we are doing information management, and it happens to be spatial or location, so we think slightly differently. So, interest of time, this is my final slide. I need to move on, but I think the opportunities for this sector, so architecture, engineering, and construction, and this is exactly the same for asset management. So that might be utilities, for example, or infrastructure. The huge opportunities are that we have the web services and the web maps that you've seen. So it's a lot easier to introduce. It's more agile. You can reiterate things. You can, as they say, mash things up. So we can take services from, this is a web service, like a map, from an external organization, and consume it. So I don't want to border on the technical there, but there are big opportunities with things becoming web enabled. There are things, if you work in construction, you're very familiar with BIM, building information modeling. So these processes and awareness of people are starting to encourage collaborative working anyway. So again, we need to build on top of this and understand the language of different disciplines, so CAD, survey professionals, and be more engaged with different people that perhaps we haven't before. So there's multiple points there, but the huge one for me is the one after BIM there is personal expectation. I think things have changed with technology so much very recently with regard to things on mobiles, and people can just find out where the nearest coffee shop is in their pocket on their phone, that people expect at least that in a business context when they're at work. And I think as an IT professional, as an information management professional, I need to deliver that. I need to make sure that people get the same experience when they're at work, and they can now. It's a lot easier to give them that. So I'll leave it there. We'll move on to the next speaker. But certainly there's huge potential with moving to web-based solutions. So thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Caroline. I am a 3D and WebGIS specialist at Esri UK. So Argent and GeoEnable's project looked at the great advantages that location information can bring to largely the construction phase of a project. In my section of the seminar, I will show you a project from start to finish to see how location analytics can be used throughout to help solve business problems, and building on GeoEnable's work, show some more advanced location analytics which could be used in a project of this type. So in this example, we're going to look at a property developer looking to redevelop an area in Nottingham with a mixed retail and residential development. Like with any large project, these projects involve a number of contractors. So these include things like architects, engineers, town planners, landscapers, property sales, and building materials companies. So we're going to look at these three different stages. So we have the planning stage, moving on to the actual construction stage, and then things like sales and management, so after they've actually been constructed themselves. So I'm going to share my screen so we can go through some examples of how we can use location analytics for this. So the first thing we're going to do in the planning stage is to look at site allocation. So for example, I have these 3 sites in Nottingham. These are potential sites I could use, but I want to find out the best one for me. So I'm first going to look at this site over here. So it's got good transport links. There's a large amount of land, sort of brown field land, a few existing buildings. However, I can then bring in different layers of information, and this is the benefit of using spatial data. Apologies, it will take a little while to load. This allows me to see, in comparison to my properties, my area that I'm going to develop, is there going to be any problems? So, apologies. Basically, what it should be showing now is flood data. It may appear in a second. And what we can see in this area, because it's so close to the river here, it basically is at a very high risk of flooding. So I'm really going to struggle to be insured on those particular properties. So that's not a suitable area for me to redevelop. What I can do instead is I'm going to look over here to this particular area. So this is a good size area. However, it does have a little possibility of retail development, but I can bring in other data. And what I can see here is this area is normally very busy in terms of traffic. It's midday at the moment. This is live traffic feeds coming in. But if you look at this at, say, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, it appears incredibly red. This is going to be then really difficult for me to be able to get all my trucks delivering my raw materials into this area, and therefore making it quite difficult to access. So perhaps this is not the area I need to look at. Instead, I can look at this area. So it's close to the city centre. It's got a relatively quiet area because it's an old industrial area. So I'm probably going to get a better chance of getting my planning permission through because I haven't got any local residents who are going to resist these plans. And it's also relatively close to the city centre, so I've got the chance of getting higher prices for my properties. So once I've selected this area, which is this one, the second stage is the sort of planning stage and talking to the local council about what I want to achieve. So the first thing I could do is create something like this simple app, which allows me to show this is the buildings beforehand, and these are the buildings after. So you can see that nearly all these buildings along this line here are not going to be redeveloped. I'm not going to knock them down. I'm simply going to revamp them. However, you can see in this area around here, this more residential area, it's going to require a lot of demolition in order to get rid of the existing infrastructure. So that allows the council to understand what sort of disturbances are going to go on the area and sort of influence whether they want to put forward this planning proposal or not. Now, as I said, I am a specialist in 3D and I absolutely love 3D. And I don't believe it's a case of a dumb model. I think it can be a really useful tool, especially in planning permissions. So, for example, this is an idea of what I imagine this area to look like. So as you can see, it's got some relatively large buildings, and it's also sort of apartment-based. So one of the major things that a planning department are going to be looking at is how does this influence the surrounding area? So I can bring in my surrounding housing, and you can see that this building over here on the left is actually significantly taller than anything else in the area. They may have an objection to this just based on sort of the skyline. But what I can also do is I can bring in a shadow analysis. So I can see as the day goes on how that shadow is going to affect the local area. So for example, if I had a local park nearby, if a shadow is cast from a very large new building, this is going to sort of be a detriment to the social space that is the park, and it may not be put through. So this is just a really nice way. You can also share this with the public, so you can have that public engagement to really allow you to have the best information possible to send out to the public and the planners, and hopefully get a very quick and smooth process through planning departments. So it's not all about architects. There is also the need to look at the raw materials that you need for things like landscaping. So after the buildings have been actually built, how much things like grass seed and gravel do I need? So what you can do is here we've brought in the areas that will need landscaping, and I can filter on a particular thing. So for example, if I needed to work out the amount of grass seed that I needed, here I have all my green areas, and I can click on individual ones, and it's going to tell me how much in terms of meters squared that is required. But also it does a sum down here at the bottom, so I can know exactly how much I would need to get from my supplier. And the last thing is often, as Argent said, they're working on multiple projects at the same time. So it's not just about collaborating with external partners, but it's also about collaborating within your company on various different projects. So if I was to see here, I've actually got another project existing at the moment in Nottingham. So what I could do is have really good communication with that team in order so we both get our raw materials at the same time, for example. So we're saving on those delivery costs from our raw material suppliers. So now we've done the sort of planning stage, we're now going to go on to the construction stage. So as you saw with Argent and GeoEnable, they've done some great work in what you can use to make sure everyone's on exactly the same page and they're getting those updates on how progress is happening. So this is just a similar example. So for example, here in orange, I can see all those buildings that are behind schedule, and I could contact the sort of project owners of those individual buildings and find out why that is. But I can also see those buildings in green are going really well. So again, I could contact them and say, okay, so why is everything going well for you? How can we learn from, the things that you've done? So that's a really good way of doing this. We also have a portal very similar to what Stephen showed. And not only can we have these maps as you've seen, but we can include the architect's drawings, for example. We can also include things like contractors' contact details. So it means we're reducing the amount of time that people are having to find this information. They can quickly go to this one place, find everything they need, and start doing and communicating with the people they need to. So now moving on to the sort of sales and management side. Again, 3D is really useful for this. So here we have a very similar model, but we're displaying it differently this time by the individual flats that we have for sale. The ones in blue are still available. The ones in orange are under sort of talks currently with property buyers. And then the red ones have already been sold. So this allows you to quickly see how much property is available and where they are. But you can also search on this 3D information. So for example, if I wanted to find out all the properties that are, say, £100,000, there they all are, simply and easily. It also searches other information. So for example, if I wanted to find out the recreation space, I can see it's only that one property at the back, which is basically a sports centre, that fits that. So we can do it both on land use, price, and any other object attributes that you have within your data. So as a sales tool, this is really useful. So for example, if I was to go over to this flat over here, and as you can see it has sort of camera motion within it. If I wanted to say, okay, someone wanted to buy this particular flat, and they wanted to see exactly what it looked like from that flat, what I can do is say, okay, this is the view from your back window. So as you can see, yes, you will see those buildings in front of you, but you also have a lot of green space in front of you and these very large trees, which should obscure the view quite a lot of these buildings in front of you. So what it allows you to do is be used as a really nice sales enablement tool for your sales team and also for, say, your marketing team. So you can include both this model and your other one, which was the more sort of rendered one, on your website to really show what this is going to look like and perhaps get people buying property before they've actually been built. And then the last thing is something called BIMS. This is Building Information Management. So we're going from the property level to internals. So this allows you to see individual building, like rooms, for example. So this is a campus. This allows me to see that this is a particular office and it's actually vacant at the moment. And I can also, if I go down, I can also see things like the actual specific interiors. So things like stairs, doors. We can do things like fire escape simulations with these types of models. So it's going from the property level to the internals, and this is the way that sort of GIS will eventually be going, which is really exciting. So if I go back. So finally, what you've seen is that basically a location platform allows multiple parties to collaborate, keeping one updated version of the truth, and allowing everyone to make proactive and informed decisions. And this is the real advantage of location information, which you've been able to see from all the 3 talks that you've seen today. So I'm going to pass back to Andrew, who's going to do the conclusion and answer any of your questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Caroline. And we've been monitoring Q&A in the Q&A window in the corner, and so far haven't seen any questions come in yet. I'd just like to remind you that if you do have any questions for any of the speakers today, then please do put your text into the Q&A box. We'll pick those up and we'll identify who's the best person to answer those. Okay, so whilst any questions are coming in, I do have a couple of questions already. There's one here for Andre, actually. We wanted to know a little bit more about your decision to use these tools. What were the key factors involved? Just waiting for Andre to come online now on the sound. So whilst that's happening, I've got a question for Caroline. Could you tell us a little bit more about the advantages of using web GIS versus traditional approaches?
Yes. So one of the big advantages is the ability to collaborate. So it's not the idea that one of the big problems that we have when we're often discussing with our customers is that everyone has information, but it's siloed in each of the individual departments. And the benefit of using WebGIS is that you can basically put all that information online, and so it's far easier for everyone to access. So again, it's going back to the idea that it's one version of truth and it's very quickly updated. There's also the idea that it's interactive data. It's not a dumb PDF. You can click on each of those specific buildings or infrastructure things, and what it allows you to do is dig down into that data and find out more information about it. So it's far more interactive. And I guess the last thing in terms of accessibility, there's no need for software. It's all browser-based. But also, as Stephen was suggesting, that it can be now used on the mobile and tablet, which allows you to access all this information wherever you are on whatever device that you choose.
Thanks very much indeed. I'm just going to see if we've managed to get Andre back online. So, Andre, are you there? Looks like we might still have a technical problem with the sound there. So I'm just going to try a question for Stephen. Let's see if we can get Stephen online here. And Stephen, perhaps you could give us a little bit more insight into some of the challenges that you faced when delivering this solution at King's Cross.
Yeah, I guess the challenges are being very focused. So I think King's Cross were actually, as in why do we want these solutions? So I think that would be a challenge, I think, with a lot of organisations. But I was quite lucky at King's Cross where that was something we were focused on. But I had to keep reminding myself, if you like, it's not about the technology, it's about the purpose of what we're trying to do, and keep focused on the products, or how the products are being used, so the web maps. I think the biggest challenge actually has been the actual information. So I did suggest, but didn't talk too much about the actual input, so CAD and survey, and that might be some of the information that we use and we publish through the solutions we have at King's Cross. But there's been a lot of work into actually getting the information, the data in the right format from the right people at the right time, and that's maybe taken longer than would have liked in some cases, but it's not through the lack of cooperation of people. It's just the practicality of we need to do it right. We need to make sure we get the data in the right format. So I think that's been the biggest challenge, actually feeding the systems, if you like, and make sure we feed them in a sustainable way.
Okay, well, thank you, Stephen. That's very helpful. We've got a question that's come in from Rob Millman to do with licensing. So how do you get around licensing issues for ArcGIS Online? He's understanding that there's one license per ArcGIS desktop license. Perhaps Caroline's the best person to address that question.
Yeah. So in terms of, yes, you are correct, you get one license per ArcGIS desktop. Basically, that entitles you to a 5-user plan, and it depends if you're going to do a lot of sort of web map making for internal or external. If you are external, and you want to just produce lots and lots of public web maps, actually maybe a team of 5 people working on that and just producing it out to the public is sufficient for you. However, if you wanted to create lots of information that your internal team can actually access, so like the stuff we've seen with Argent, what you can do is then buy additional users, and you don't actually have to have ArcGIS Online sign-ins. What you can do is set it up so it does things like Active Directory. So they can use their existing sign-ins for their computers rather than having to generate lots of individual ones to their ArcGIS Online account. So there are ways of getting around it, and it's just a case you have to buy additional users. But it's not a bad thing. The fact that you have an identity means you can track the amount of usage of particular things. You can understand how your colleagues use it, so what are the most popular maps. So having that identity in there is actually an important thing, and it's nice to have those named users rather than just having anonymous access.
Great, thanks very much. I hope that answered your question, Rob. If it didn't, then we're always available after the webinar, and we'll provide a couple of contact details in a moment. In fact, we are running slightly behind time, so if there are any further questions, we'll address them now, and I don't think there are. Okay, right, I'm just going to move on to one more slide here. For those interested in finding out more, there's some further information here. We, on our website, have a couple of documents which you'll probably find useful. One is a case study which talks about what Argent did at King's Cross and have been doing. And we've also got a brochure on our AEC spatial collaboration solution, which will give you more information on the different options for not only licensing but also software and services. There's an email address there which you can use to contact us, and there's also a link there to that brochure. Don't worry too much about taking those down though, because we will send out an email to everybody who's been on the webinar with that information as well. Okay, well, I'm just going to hand over to Jane, who will do the final wrap-up.
Yes, thank you to everyone for attending today's webinar, and thank you to our presenters as well. A recording of this webinar will be posted online after the event. As was mentioned, the link directly to this will be emailed to you. Now, any questions not answered during the webinar, we will follow up with directly. On closing, you will see an online feedback survey. This will only take about 2 minutes to complete, and we would really appreciate your feedback on today's webinar, what you liked and what we could improve on. Thank you again for attending.